Welcome to the TryPod, where we break down the NRL every game, every week from a punting perspective. I'm Jacob Wynn. I'm off a 3-1 winning round 25. Thank you and welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. It was a pretty good round, honestly. You got to be happy with 3-1. It could have done even better. I told you I was that close. I had the Broncos written down, typed out as a best bet, and then somehow I second guessed it. I deleted that one, but I told you it was certain to win once I did that. So if you did take -9.5, they won by 30 or 40. I'll get into all the games after best bets. Additionally, and then I left a couple of leans alone as well that would have won. And of course, my one losing tip lost badly, which was the Finns. But we had one win where we had +6.5 with the Dogs, lost by 6. So, if you don't get that, it's 2-2. So I'll take 3-1, and I'll revisit the games we did get up. But I wanted to also shout out specifically the sharpshooters. It's been a great addition to the show. It means you get more breakdowns, more best bets. And we had a 4-0 sharpshooter sweep. That's a bit of a tongue twister. Let me see if I can remember off the top of my head. Undertaker, he had Kohler to score a try. Waited a little late, but that's a game where Manly scored 10 tries. Benny had the game I've got on screen. He took Dragons under 20.5. Dragons was scoreless in a 40-0 loss. Padonis had +10.5 with Para. They won by 20. Benny Williamson had the longest odds winner of them all, $3.10 with Buller, and Buller finishes off one of the tries of the season with West. So a really successful week. And I'll go game by game just quickly. We've got some feedback that people still like the recap. It has helped me not having to produce it on a Sunday. I wish I could, and we'll see what the future holds. But we'll do a rapid round 25 recap after best bets. But I just wanted to mention the Brandon Smith news, since we're sort of a punting pod, and then there's obviously like a punting angle to that story. I guess my perspective would be it's a bit of a sensationalist headline, the whole betting scandal, and you're thinking, what's he done? And there's sort of like a side issue that there were rumors that he enjoys a punt himself and that he owed money to teammates, right? So then people have sort of tied that all in. Oh, he's got in deep. What's he done? Who's he involved with? At the end of the day, Brandon Smith is charged with trying to hook up a few friends, allegedly, with some Peruvian marching powder. Now, you can say that's unacceptable. Depending on what your stance is. Personally, I'm a clean skin, so I could take the high ground all I want to. But I would just say, how many players, in reality, how many of these players are partaking? You're pretty naive if you don't think it's fairly common. And there's been fair few high-profile players busted over the years, and they do generally get a slap on the wrist. Now, I know that if Smith was like a link man and trying to supply multiple people, then maybe that's a more serious charge, and I understand that. But then the whole betting aspect of it, inside information, they reckon he mentioned over text message to somebody the week he was coming back, potentially what role he was playing. So maybe told the guy he was going to be on the bench rather than starting. Maybe that helps you with a try scorer bet. I don't know. And also did give advice on whether Latrell was going to play that week. And I admit, that's not the right thing to do. But if you guys listen to any other of the NRL player podcasts, and there are many, including Brandon Smith himself was a regular on the buy round, you can get a lot of that information. They let that sort of info slip every single week. How do you think I knew Jonah Pezzett was going to get a start, right? Maybe I listened to a podcast where his manager said, I'm sworn to secrecy, but pretty much gave you the clearest hint that the Storm were reshuffling. What about 5 years ago, one of the greatest bets we had in pod history, where Craig Bellamy went on the radio in Melbourne and admitted he was resting his whole team, and the bookies didn't know about it. And we got Dragons +16.5 in a game they closed favourite in the final round of round 20. And that happened again this week. Penrith was $1.60 favourite yesterday. Wait till we get to the Penrith game. You won't wait long. It's Thursday night. Their New South Wales Cup team's trotting out. And that line moved drastically, and apparently the people obviously hit that line before the bookies were aware. So, it's not the crime of the century that Brandon Smith, mentioned a couple of things. People ask in the press conferences, has this player been training? Do you think he's going to be back? And I know the player's meant to remain tight-lipped if it's not officially in the team list, but that information slips through. It's very different to, what you might initially take out of a headline, thinking that someone's match fixing, or really disrupting sort of the integrity of a game. So I would just say, like, I think what Ezra Mam did was worse. He's involved drugs too, and alcohol, and driving without a license and injuring somebody, right? And he was back after eight games. So, let me know. Have your say as well. Is this such a bad offense? Because people are like, oh, his career's over. I mean, is that because Brandon Smith's best years potentially are behind him and no one really cares if he plays for their club again, as opposed to Ezra Mann that has so many, seasons ahead of him at the highest level? Should a player's form and their future prospects matter when it comes to punishments? What do you think? I mean, reality is it does in terms of teams wanting to take a risk and take a PR hit. I mean, one other thing I'll say is, are we still wondering why Terrell May was let go unexpectedly, similar to Smith? And we know that they were fraternizing off the field, those two fellas. If you've seen the clip I've seen, you know exactly what I mean. So a few thoughts on the story of the week there. Now I'll get to my best bets, or in fact, this week, it's best bet. And I feel like I'm shortchanging you guys because I haven't come up with several bets, but like that is the nature of the TryPod. I don't force anything. Some weeks you get 2 best bets, some weeks you get 5. Generally, I seem to find a best bet in every other game. So it's been 3 or 4 basically every week. But I'll explain exactly why I just couldn't get over the line in 7 of the 8 games. And I'll give you the one that I do like, which is the Queensland Derby. I'm taking North Queensland at home, plus 7.5 at $1.83. That's in the alt line on Ladbrokes and Neds. It's plus $6.5, $90, but for 7 cents, let's take field goal insurance, especially with Adam Reynolds looming. I saw enough out of the Cowboys showing fight in Leichhardt where they really didn't have to. They could have gone away easily. This is the final game of the season for North Queensland because they have to buy in round 27. At home against Brisbane, it's a good one to get up for. Brisbane's still not full strength. Obviously, Brisbane's looked really good the last 2 weeks, but I think those opponents were both pretty soft, and that includes my Finns, who unfortunately that's the truth defensively. And I don't know whether Brisbane will, find points so plentiful without their starting halves. Acknowledging that Reynolds is looming there, but still no man. And North Queensland's not a bad outfit that can go toe-to-toe with Brisbane at home in front of a big crowd, I believe. Someone says I'm going against Benny. Tell me what Benny's tip is. I've got several tips from the sharpshooters, including 2 of the boys are actually on that game. So maybe someone knows something. Maybe somebody knows Benny Williamson's tip already. I don't know. We'll get to all that. But before we do, we rewind and we do a rapid recap of round 25. So Thursday night, the Rabbitohs destroyed the Dragons. This triggered me because I've been against the Dragons like 6 of the last 7 weeks, and we might have had 1 or 2 wins in that at best because the Dragons have fought tooth and nail. I mean, the perfect example in New Zealand, New Zealand's fighting for top 4. They're at home. Dragons lose half the forward pack in the first half, and you can't replace people. You had Sloan as 18th man, and yet the Dragons still held New Zealand to 14 points. And then a week later, in the easiest, on paper, the easiest game the Dragons have played in 2 months, in terms of like the Dragons will pick them instead of an underdog, they lose 40-0. And I said I leaned Souths, but just because they'd flipped to favoritism on Tuesday, I left it alone. And it's a flogging. And I'm glad that Benny Howard hit the winner there. But, I should have found that one. And I keep saying one of these weeks Dragons are going to fold. And then the week I say I just can't keep betting against them and watching them punch above their weight. Of course, they completely capitulated. And then I had a lean to the Raiders. I didn't play it. I said I wanted plus 4.5. I think there were some on game day, but the line was 3.5 on Tuesday. I left it alone, and it ends up being a crazy comeback win. But, I mean, the Raiders were never down more than 4, I don't think. So, again, that could have been a key number. But in the end, the Raiders won by 4. Penrith going down in Golden Point back-to-back weeks. You saw the finish, one of the craziest you've ever seen. And that's going to give a lot of belief to the Raiders. It was an important win for them in Mudgee to keep Penrith out of the top 4. Now, when we get to Penrith Bulldogs this week, we can talk about how that's no longer really a possibility or a reality for Penrith. So what a gut punch for the Panthers after 9 or 10 straight wins to go down in Golden Point in that sort of fashion in back-to-back weeks to the 2 best sides in the competition. And that was a statement win for Canberra. Incredible game, and a lot of confidence would be built out of that victory as well. First best bet on the line was Dogs. We had +6.5. Look, when you win by half a point, you're going to say, yeah, there's a bit of luck involved. But I mean, I lost what? I lost an unders best bet involving the Dogs 2 weeks ago, where the kickers kicked, I think, 10 from 11 or 9 from 10. And Stephen Crichton nailed one from the sideline and didn't miss, right, against the Roosters. In fact, nobody missed. Sorry, it was like 9 from 9 in the game. And then in this one, Stephen Crichton missed twice. And I thought, oh, yeah, Storm will kick a late penalty or a field goal and win by 7. And Dogs will kick 1 from 3. And Pappenhausen tried with like 2 minutes to go or 90 seconds to go. And very few teams try to actually extend the lead from 6 to 7 with 2 minutes to go. Because if you miss, you give them a 7-tackle set. Most teams just want to kick to a corner and say, you're down 6, you got to go 90, 95 meters. But no, cheeky Pappenhausen, he goes for the field goal to crush us and he misses. And that's the difference between a best bet winning or losing. Though I was going to say after that, Crichton actually nearly got the put down to make it 20 all. Look, and according to the way that it's ruled these days, that probably wasn't a regrip and probably a fair call. But basically, I got what we needed out of that one. I said the Dogs could fight for 80, which was +6.5. But Melbourne did get a big win that basically secures a top 2 finish. So there's a high probability those two teams, Canterbury and Melbourne, will meet again, and it will be at the same venue at Amy Park in the first week of the finals with all likelihood. Okay, then the game I lost, Dolphins Eagles. And, you know, I hate it when people come at me after a game and say, oh, this was so obvious. Oh, you should have done that, or you should have known this, right? But it's so easy to do. I mean, I can so easily see it in hindsight. Why did I play the Dolphins at 4 Pines in DCE's 350th? It just goes to show how much the emotion and occasion can mean. That I basically said to myself, I understand it's a big day for Manly, but even if they play their best, I think the Dolphins can play their best too, and I think the Dolphins are the better team. But the energy and enthusiasm, I mean, neither team wanted any part of the collision in this one. It was basically just who has the footy is going to score. And that's been the case for the Dolphins for several weeks. And I've talked about this. The Dolphins need to score 3 tries in a row in 8 or 10 minutes to beat you. And then you might score 1 or 2 in the next 10 or 15 minutes. But the Dolphins are not going to go arm wrestle, grind with you for 20 or 30 minutes and try and outscore you by 4 or 6 points in that time. That's not their style. So, again, in retrospect, why didn't I play a Dolphins over if I liked the Dolphins? And then I would have got the backdoor cover because the Dolphins scored the final 2 or 3 tries. But, hey, I got it badly wrong. It really hurt me. And you know what? I was talking to people that night saying my hope is lost. The Roosters' form was too hot. The Dolphins had lost to the 2 teams they were in direct competition with for top 8 in Roosters and Sea Eagles. Lost to the big brother Brisbane in a game we led by 14 in the second half. The Dolphins will go down as the team that with the greatest attack that never made finals. Like, potentially lead the comp in scoring and miss the finals. That's how it looked. But that was unless there was a surprise Saturday night, which we'll get to. But before that, we had Warriors 32 dispatch the Titans 18 in front of basically a Warriors home crowd at Seabus. And we did have the best bet was only -3.5. Funnily enough, that closed 1.5. So we didn't get closing line value, but we did get a comprehensive win. It meant a lot to New Zealand, and the Warriors the Titans, luckily for us, put out a typical Titans performance. And then this was the shocker. And this just makes the final couple of weeks of the season that much more enthralling. And I'm here for it because that's new life for the Finns. The Eels 30 beat the Roosters 10. It shows the improvement that Para's made under Riles. And the Roosters obviously losing Sam Walker early in the game changed everything. And you probably still, would be disappointed to let in 30 points, I think. But I think every Eels try was off a kick or apart from the Addo-Carr length of the field intercept try. So maybe it wasn't a total blowout, but Parramatta, I think, had like a 2-try lead at halftime, extended that second half. Roosters looked like they might make a comeback. A couple of classy tries for the Roosters, both involving Marky Mark, but that's as close as it got. The Eels closed it out. And you know what? If you're going to lose Roosters, like every point mattered as well, because the Roosters actually, after having a plus minus 150 points inferior to the Finns 3 weeks ago, actually had a better differential than the Dolphins going into this game. But then by virtue of a 20-point loss, now the Dolphins have the advantage again. So, every point in the finals race, let alone competition points, but every point on the field is mattering as well, which is how we like it. And yeah, double blow for the Roosters, obviously losing the game you thought you should win by all rights, and you were a 10-point favourite. And Sam Walker with the HIA is ruled out this round, as I'm sure many of you would know. Then Broncos, I told you, minus 9.5. It was 10.5 most places. You could still play 9.5 Tuesday. Why didn't I do it? I just had this feeling maybe Newcastle, after being pitiful for 3 straight weeks, would put in at home. The funny thing is that the Knights butchered a couple of tries, just like they did. Remember the week I played overs in the Knights-Cowboys game, and they butchered about 4 tries? Well, that carried into Brisbane, into the Brisbane game. And you know what? The Knights made a clean line break, and Jake Arthur, if he catches the pass, he is running away to cut the deficit to 2 points. So it's a 2-point game if the Knights can execute a draw and pass with like 25 to go. But it just all went downhill from there. Of course, the margin remained 8, and then Brisbane just piled it on with about 4 or 5 tries late. Again, this is a Newcastle team that Adam O'Brien says, has no quit in them. Lost by 34 at home. And finally, Tigers-Cowboys. That was a really exciting finish to the round. And I was glad that I only got the game half right. I liked Tigers. Line was minus 2.5. You lose if you're on that, despite leading by 12 late. But I also liked overs, and the Tigers did get over their team tries total of 4.5 tries with 5 tries. And we had that fairly early in the game, or, with a good 20 plus minutes to spare. But that was the end of it for the Tigers. Obviously, Dewey lost first half, was a big out, but you do have a halfback on the bench in Fainu, though I think he did get a head knock late as well. So Tigers had to reshuffle, but I was quite impressed by the Cowboys. And of course, it was a Drinkwater masterclass with I think a hand in all 3 of the final tries, and he kicked 2 or 3 from the sideline as well in that final flurry for the Cowboys to actually dash the Tigers' hopes. Because after all the results, Dolphins losing and Roosters losing, and going back a couple of weeks, the Tigers had got every result they could have asked for and would have been in the final top 8 spot hunt themselves this weekend had they been able to close out a 12-point win, but it wasn't to be. But bloody exciting game with some cracking tries as well, and it secured a strong pod best bet return as well, as I said, as we did go 3-1. Thanks for all the comments that are flying in. There's almost too many. To some people saying, can you please move on? But they might have been a fan of a team that had unhappy returns. Almost too many to include. Yes, Hannay is going to be at the Titans, but we can talk about Titans, although not for a little while, because they are the 8th of 8 game this weekend. So now let's talk round 26. Bulldogs, Panthers. There's a fair bit to talk about here if you haven't heard the news. I wrote in my notes, because I start with this game, so I'm sort of looking at this game just after 4 o'clock when the team lists were finalised, and I wrote Dogs versus Panthers New South Wales Cup side. And I wrote line 17.5 and climbing, because I just knew it wouldn't even be 17.5 by 5:30 when I did the pod. So even if and sure enough, it's 20.5 now, So this line was like 9.5 yesterday. So I could only play dogs, and I was thinking, I'd lay 17.5 as a best bet, but I just knew that wouldn't even be available by the time I went live. So once again, it's a bit of a limitation of, this window where I share the results, but I also want to make it as user-friendly to follow. I'm going to reconsider, what the best way is to release plays in order to give you guys the best opportunity to succeed and get the best returns. So hopefully that keeps you, engaged in the pod. But at the same time, I want to make it as easy to follow in terms of, is the advice I'm giving out sound, and am I, beating the bookies more often than not? And this season, our profits, over $1,000 on an example $100 per bet staker. Okay. And there's nothing stopping you taking what you learn from the pod and then applying it to your own bets. And perhaps, you could have bet against Penrith yesterday when you heard that they were going to be resting, because that news was public yesterday. And as I say, dogs were still $1.30 something and minus 9.5. But now it's the highest line of the season, right? And let's just talk about the decision by Ivan, because he has rested the entire 17. It's not even about rest, right? Because Isaiah Yo's been out for 3 weeks and then just got back last round. So Isaiah Yo doesn't need a rest. Ivan has given his team the bye. He has just manufactured a bye for his first grade squad. And I know people will get up in arms about that decision because this was one of the games of the season when the Bulldogs and Panthers met like 6 or 8 weeks ago. It was a cracking game and it promised to be another beauty this week. I mean, look at how entertaining Penrith have been on their winning streak. And then even the last 2 losses, those games went to Golden Point and they've been some of the best contests of the year. And we would have loved to see this to kick off round 26. However, from Penrith's perspective, they've had a savage draw. I've just mentioned that they've played the best 2 teams in the comp and gone to Golden Point and lost them both. They've been up for like 12 straight weeks because Penrith had to just keep winning. And Penrith already played and won a finals intensity style match against the Bulldogs. Did they really want to go round 2 here? Right? Because ultimately, all that Penrith's going to be judged on this season, and now they know they're not going to finish top 4, all that Penrith will be judged on is, can Penrith win 4 straight games in the finals? Because they will be from 5th to 8th, and they will have to win each and every week. And nobody's ever done it, though Penrith did have to play all 4 weeks in the finals in 2021 because they lost in week 1 of the finals. And that's sort of the same thing. Like, that's still 4 hard-fought games, and Penrith got through that and won, but they won by the skin of their teeth, of course, a 2-point win in a game where they got an intercept try late against Souths, right? But so you can win playing all 4 weeks. You can make a grand final potentially from outside the top 4. If any team could do it, you can't write off Penrith. I think you're crazy to, like, nobody is saying Penrith are no chance. It's very popular for everyone to say, oh, I give them a chance, but it's not likely, because it's not likely that any team is going to win 4 in a row against good opposition. But if Penrith has any hope, they want to be fresh and they certainly don't want to sustain any more injuries. That's why Ivan has done this. Does it affect the integrity of the comp? Because you've just given a sort of a free win to the Bulldogs. People pay money to go to these games. The broadcasters pay a lot of money to put these games on Thursday night, and it's going to be a lot less interest with like no household names for Penrith side. Is that right? Is that fair? I think, you've got the ability to do it. It's a brutal competition. Personally, as someone that's a massive league fan, I can find interest in watching a second string side play because it's a different sort of intensity. It's different mentality to actually how do you dispatch a side that's got nowhere near the level of skill as you, but you've got 17 blokes that have got absolutely nothing to lose. Like, it's intriguing to me, but it is disappointing. But ultimately, I think I respect it, and I don't blame Ivan, because no team has played more meaningful football in the last 5 years than the Panthers, and all their players always play rep games and internationals as well. So can you really blame him for giving his team a breather if he felt he needed that? That's the decision Penrith has made. So let me minimize my own face on your display, and then let's look at the lineups. You're not going to recognize many of these Panthers names. We'll start with the Bulldogs. Kickout and Harry Hayes are out for the Dogs, but they're obviously fairly strong. And then Penrith, I say it's not just a bunch of the key players getting a rest or the origin players. It's an entirely new 17. 4 players are on debut for the Panthers. Eisenhuth is captain. A crazy side note, fact check me if I'm wrong here. Eisenhuth has been in the Panthers squad the last 4 years. He's played over 60 games, which is average like over 15 a season, but somehow didn't get a start any of the 4 grand finals. There is a little bit of NRL experience there. Dane Laurie, fullback. Cole and Schneider are your halves. How do you handicap a game like this? It's not an NRL game. It's an NRL side against a New South Wales Cup side. Yes, Penrith B team did win in New Zealand, but I called it Penrith B. That was with about half the first team out. Like, arguably the best 6 or 7 players were out, close to. This is the entire 17 out, right? So I could only play the Dogs. But again, if you want to play the Dogs, you knew this news yesterday. I'd lay 9.5 yesterday. That's fine. But now it's 20.5, So it's just a classic case of timing. If you think that the Dogs are a foregone conclusion, then that was the bet of the year yesterday. And there's nothing stopping you from betting it yesterday. I mean, we don't know about how to time travel yet, but there was nothing stopping you yesterday when this news broke. So don't play a bet because you wish you took it earlier, is sort of my point. And the Doggies, especially, the fact that they've lost 3 of their last 4 and they're coming in off a tight loss where they actually didn't disgrace themselves down in Melbourne. I mean, I think the Dogs will destroy Penrith here. So even at 20.5, the Dogs might still be the side, but it's just, you can understand my principle that I'm not going to take the worst of the number. And the biggest risk that you do get when you have that massive gulf in talent and experience is the mindset, I would say. So how do the Dogs sort of deal with this game? But I dare say the Dogs destroy Penrith, and that's going to be a soft kill for the Bulldogs, which will be very timely for them as well ahead of finals, because the Dogs should win this one without sort of getting out of second or third gear. Let's move. Do you guys agree with me? Let me know in the comments, and let's move to New Zealand at 6 p.m. Aussie time on Friday night. It's Warriors Eels, and the line is New Zealand -4.5. Okay, New Zealand's into $1.70 to finish in the top 4, and they can just win their way in, win this game, beat Manly next week, they're in for sure, but also even just matching results with the teams below them. So if anyone else below them slips up, it actually could afford some wiggle room for New Zealand as well. And the Warriors took care of business on the Gold Coast. That was nice for us. We laid the line there, had a best bet, and New Zealand are unchanged in their lineup as well. The Eels did the whole comp a favour, especially my Finns, as I mentioned, Saturday night, commanding win over the Chooks, also named the same 17. So, look, I thought New Zealand played pretty well against the Titans, but I do think the Gold Coast are a mess, so I'm not totally convinced by New Zealand. Last time the Warriors played at home, remember, they couldn't put away a decimated Dragons who lost the following week by 40. And you look at the Bulldogs who've lost 3 or 4, I just mentioned, the only win was against New Zealand. So what if New Zealand's just somehow not that good, but they're just living off the good start to the year that put them in finals position, and they're just clinging on with a more friendly draw and, beating teams like the Titans last week and the Dragons unconvincingly. But having said that, New Zealand, still is a team that is pretty strong and physical, and at home usually makes you earn it. I couldn't play New Zealand. Put it this way: the line is -4.5. That's the same line that it was against St. George. But to me, Parramatta are going a fair bit better at this point in time than the Dragons. So while I did like the Warriors with the line against St. George 2 weeks ago, it doesn't represent value to me now. I look at Para; they're the only side I could play in this one. I do worry a little bit about Lomax's goal kicking. It seems wildly inconsistent. They didn't need it against the Roosters. But then again, you look at on the other side of the equation, Boyd is not much better for New Zealand. I think, as I said before about physicality, New Zealand packs more punch, but I do prefer Para's playmakers. So that's why I would play the Eels with the start in this game. So I considered taking the +4.5, as someone says, I can't see New Zealand scoring too many points. But then ultimately, to then play the other side of it, I just thought to myself, this game is as important to New Zealand as any game this whole season. They're at home. It's their final home game of the regular season. I know New Zealand's going to turn up for this. I don't really want to bet against a team that I know will give their best effort. And at the end of the day, it's a top 4 side from across the Tasman that I don't need to bet against. So I left it alone. Here's a big one. This is probably the biggest game of the weekend. Storm Roosters at Amy Park. And the Roosters are a 3.5 point underdog. Let me scroll down to reveal the team lists here. And what a week for the Roosters. I obviously touched on the Brandon Smith news, but it's a double whammy, the fact that the crimes he's been charged for all occurred when he was playing for the Roosters and implicate Roosters teammates. So you've got that on top of the fact that they lost to Para, and I mentioned before, it wasn't just the 2 competition points, it was a valuable 20 on the plus minus, which basically the way it shakes out, you could say, well, who knows who'll end up with a better for and against out of the Finns and the Roosters because they're only 10 points apart. The Finns are 10 points better. But the Finns have to win one more game than the Roosters. So I can't really see the Finns winning twice and the Roosters only once, but the Roosters making up 10 points in differential. Unless the Roosters smash the Storm here and then lost to the Bunnies, which I don't see happening. Or if the Roosters lose narrowly here and then smash the Bunnies, which is possible, but equally, the Dolphins could win well over the Titans this weekend, and that round 27 game against the Raiders is a massive wild card. So basically, I can tell you that the Roosters need to win the same number of games as the Finns to get into the finals. Right? Unless they both win none, then Manly will leapfrog the pair. But basically, the Roosters have to probably win out because I do think the Finns could win out to close the year, which means I think this game in Melbourne is going to decide whether the Roosters play finals footy. So season on the line for the Chooks because the Dolphins will be favoured the following day, and I think I've explained the advantageous matchups for round 27. Okay, now the Roosters wouldn't be in this position if they had actually closed out the win against the Storm a month ago. Remember that game at Allianz? That was crazy. We took the Roosters because Munster was out. I think it was his father's funeral. Pappy was out with ongoing calf complaints. And then Jerome Hughes did his shoulder in the first half, and the Roosters built a 2-try lead. It included a Tupou put down where he spilled it, and that game was there for the taking for the Roosters, but keeping the door ajar allowed Harry Houdini to put his side on his back and actually steal the 2 points for the Storm. I mean, the Roosters would be comfortable right now if they'd just won that game. And there's obviously others that Roosters fans will tell you that they, are going to rue all season long. And I understand everybody has games they look back on and should have won, but that particularly, and it was worth revisiting because this is the same matchup, right? On the other hand, what about Melbourne just finding a way to win close games like that one a month ago at Penrith in Golden Point with a couple of key men out? That was a huge upset win. That was orchestrated by Harry Grant again. And then last week against the Dogs, you survived that put down by Crichton, or it would have been 20-all. Now, from a punting perspective, we've got Raiders minor premierships, so it's annoying that Melbourne has continuously won all these tight games, because if Melbourne had dropped any of those, the minor prem would be basically sealed. But in fairness, the Raiders are still $1.30 to win the minor premiership, as in to finish top of the regular season ladder. And it's probably because the bookies are very wary that Melbourne might send a second team of their own to Brisbane next week. But you just don't know what's going to happen with that, because the Storm game next week against Brisbane is on a Thursday. So if you wanted to play your full-strength team on a Thursday, that'll still be fine by finals. Anytime you put your best players in harm's way, something can happen. But in terms of recovery, it's quite different to like Canberra that's got to play Sunday in round 27. So there's that. There's also the fact that quite a few good players are actually out this week for the Storm, which may signal that Melbourne's going to rest some this week and some next week. So trying to read Melbourne's mentality is interesting here. But that win last week against the Bulldogs basically assures the Storm are going to be top two. That's because Melbourne are 4 points higher than the Dogs. And you might say, well, you can catch up 4 points in 2 weeks if Melbourne lose this week and lose to Brisbane. But there's a 150 plus minus between them as well. So pretty much Melbourne doesn't have to win again. It will still be top two. And that's why Eli Katoa, Josh King, Nick Meaney, and Xavier Coates are all rested this week. And you already probably knew Harry Grant would be suspended, while Jerome Hughes, there were whispers that he could be considered in this contest. He is not named. So it's not a full-strength Storm. But then the Roosters go in without Sam Walker, which means Sandon Smith slots to 6, shifting Savala to 7. And the Chooks do importantly welcome back Daniel Tupou. I could only play the Roosters here. There is so much on the line for the Chooks. You know that they are going to empty the clip in this one. The biggest advantage is the Roosters' outside backs. There are still quite a few important outside backs out for the Storm. Although, let me double check this on the run. Did I see Warbrick is in the reserves? That would be handy, especially when you think of aerial contest and Tupou and the fact that Coates is being held out of this one. So, that could even the equation a little bit. What else will even the equation? Of course, having Munster and Wishart in your halves is a lot more experience than Savala and Smith, as good as those two did play earlier this year together. That's an advantage to the Purple Halves, of course. I think the Roosters then have the better pack, more experience for sure. But Melbourne at home, you know that they show up and they play, above their weight as well, even some of the unheralded players. So you've got to be brave to go against Melbourne in Melbourne. I'll be honest, I think this game should be pick 'em. I think dead set with what's on the line for the Roosters, it's a coin toss. So maybe I should take the +2.5. But I suppose I'm just considering that there's disruption this week and the big disappointment of that setback just 6 days before this one kicks off. As opposed to a Melbourne side that remains at home and is settled, maybe Melbourne should be a couple of points favorite with those sort of intangibles. So that's why I didn't step into this one. But the Undertaker has got a play, so let's have a listen.
G'day guys, Matty here. 4 wins in a row, finishing out the year pretty well. My bet of the week, I'm going to go Roosters money line against Melbourne Storm, $2.34 in Sportsbet. The Roosters are catching 3.5 points or 2.5 points, same thing. Yeah, you can keep it. I just want to take the head-to-head price. Let's get a bit funky with it. Yeah, the Storm are off a pretty tough month of footy. They've been winning games, but winning pretty tight. They do have top 2 wrapped up for a home final. I don't think they really care if they finish first or second. They just want that home final. They ultimately just want to win a premiership. That's all that matters to them. The Roosters are off a really bad loss. They'll look to bounce back. They need to win one more game to guarantee their spot in the final. So motivation is completely lopsided. Give me the Roosters money line. They get the win outright. Good luck.
Makes a lot of sense, Andy. I love it. Well done on winning 4 in a row. He was feeling pretty down just, prior to the last month, but Undertaker's seeing it well, and I agree that's the only side I could have played on Friday night. On Saturday, in the nation's capital, Raiders, Tigers, Wests are a 12.5-point underdog. Canberra are off that classic finish, one of the classic finishes to an NRL game of all time in Mudgee, as we covered. Yet another lean are left on the table. Savage is out for the season, but Tamale, who had an incredible rookie campaign before his injury, makes a timely return, so you get a straight swap on the wing there. The Tigers needed about 10 results to go their way that were out of their control in order to make a highly improbable finals push, right? And about 7 of those necessary outcomes did play out, only for West, as I mentioned before, to blow a 12-point lead late at Leichhardt to a Cows side with nothing to play for. And then to add injury to insult, if you will, Dewey's season is over with a facial fracture. We got the 5 tries that we needed, at least, out of West to win the best bet, with Fainu coming on at halfback. And so he starts there this week. And then Toa is also back from an injury. And similarly to what I said about the Storm, I can see Canberra looking at this final home game as like, let's have one big comprehensive output before potentially cooling our heels in round 27 in the concluding game of the season. So this could be that last big effort by a team that's obviously then got bigger fish to fry. So I expect the Green Machine will put on a bit of a show for us on Saturday. And as for West, no way I'm backing them this week, right? They're off a major disappointment, albeit the odds were slim of making the finals, but, those hopes have been dashed now. What West do have gone for them, you run your eye over the team list and see what you think. It's still a solid team. There is still talent. I think West can come up with points. So if I had a lean to the total, it would be overs in this as well. Because, look, it's a step up in class. Like I saw the Tigers, even after losing Dewey, put on 5 tries against North Queensland. Now, it's a bit different to crack the Cowboys as opposed to Canberra. But I think the Tigers, with nothing to lose, will play enterprising here. So the key to this game is going to be Benji's boys will play with flair. If they have some success, the Tigers, they could stay competitive in the game. But if the Tigers, get disappointed, a couple of bounces go against them, Raiders get a breakaway try, something like that, I could also easily see Sticky's side overwhelming the visitors in front of a parochial crowd and then winning big. So it's going to come down to West will chance their arm. If a few things come off, they can keep it interesting. And if not, it could get ugly. So it sort of depends on what faith you've got that West can have a little bit of joy with the footy on Saturday afternoon. After that one, this is the closest game of the weekend on paper. Dragons Seagulls is Pick'em. It's at Jubilee Stadium. And once again, thank you to Parramatta for keeping the top 8 race wide open. Manly had suffered a 4-game skid, but snapping that against my Finns means they will continue to play meaningful footy for now. St. George, again, have arguably punched above their weight just about every week. And then last week, when it should have been a more winnable game against the Bunnies, they were completely blown off the park, the Red V. And look, I expect a fairly different application this round. You got a 9-day turnaround. You're at home. I think the Dragons will bounce back. Sewer is right to go from his knee injury. And 2 of the 3 forwards that they lost early in Auckland, DeBellin and Sele, are also returning from their head knocks. Sloan gets a start on the wing. The Seagulls select the same 17 that dropped 10 tries on my Finns in DCE's 350th. I'll say overall that these are 2 teams I don't see among the elite 8 of the league, and I haven't all season long. And if you follow the pod regularly, I've had a lot more bets against both St. George and Manly than I have had on them. And it's not that I'm stubborn in my belief the whole season through. I completely acknowledge situational spots, specific matchups. I adjust my opinion every week. But I think generally I haven't thought as highly of either of these teams as what the market has tended to reflect. Therefore, it's going to be tough for me to find a strong, best bet conviction in this one. Coin toss odds feels pretty fair, but I think I would pick the Dragons to win if I had to. Off a humiliating defeat, getting reinforcements in now, playing at home, and you could see Manly, at least I could see Manly experiencing a come down after that emotional high at 4 Pines. Garrick was a big loss, but you just don't notice it when a team puts on 10 tries. But I think Garrick will be missed. And you know what else I think will be missed is some kicks at goal by Cherry. I mean, he kicked 90% last week. He's not going to continue at that clip. So I said to myself, you know what? St. George are a best bet here. If I can get him as an underdog in any market, if I can, get a hook at halftime, can I get plus half a try? If I can get St. George reflected as an underdog, I think they should be a slight favourite. So that would justifiably be a best bet. But the Dragons are not an underdog anywhere. $1.90 is the best you get. Maybe that's good enough for you if you see it that way. But since $1.90 to win is close to what I think is a fair price, maybe I'd make the Dragons $1.80. I'm not going to risk 10 to win 9 there. Let's move to the game where I do have my best bet, Cowboys Broncos. Ben Willie and Padonis are also on this same game. Do I need to scroll the team list so you can have a look as well? Cowboys Broncos there. 6.5 line everywhere. 6.5 line everywhere. And I played the plus 7.5 alt line for 7 cents less. So $1.83 Ladbrokes and Neds is the best bet. Impressive comeback by North Queensland on Sunday. Like, that meant nothing to the Cows in the scheme of things, but it showed they're still fighting for the coach. You're down 2 tries late in the game, and a Drinky masterclass was a mighty effort. And if anything, if the Cowboys had lost, we would have said, oh, well, maybe it was a look-ahead game because this is a more important game at home, hosting their interstate rival. It's the same squad as you'd expect, selected by Peyton, with no losses sustained in that trip south. And then speaking of successful travels, Brisbane had the same, an Origin-style camp ahead of the Knights game, which was close for a little while, but then blew out big time in Brisbane's favour. No injuries or suspensions, and in fact, Piakura returns from concussion, and Adam Reynolds is in the reserves. And yes, I did see that when I took the best bet, so I'm still hoping that he doesn't play, but if Reynolds is in this game, I don't think the Cowboys are without hope. And I recognise that I've got one team whose season is effectively over, and Brisbane, on the other hand, are clicking into gear for a finals campaign where it looks like, especially with Penrith showing their hand, it looks like Brisbane's very likely to get at least a home eliminator. In fact, Brisbane still has a real shot at top 4, to be fair. And I look at Madge as well. He's worked wonders in the past in Origin or international arena when he's done short camps where he can't really flog the players, but he does bring a group of men together for sure. It's just that I'm playing it as a best bet because, to me, I think the Cowboys can treat this like this is their grand final. The crowd will be big. It's against Big Brother Brisbane. And the Cowboys certainly have had their fair share of disappointment this year, but they're not often crushed at home. And I think if I was questioning the heart of the Cowboys, I'd leave this. But it goes back to I'm getting a bit of confidence out of the fight on Sunday Arvo last week, which was only 2 days ago, of course, so fresh in the memory. And I think that that's showing you that this team will fight to finish the year strong. I also think there could be a little bit of fool's gold with Brisbane because they lost their 2 starting halves and then they've just rolled tries in against my Finns and then the Knights. The problem is the Finns can't defend, as I've admitted in the last couple of weeks, and the Knights, are soft as anyone as well. So I actually think this could be a bigger challenge for Brisbane. And look, Padonis is on for a best bet. I'm almost certain he's going to see it the same way. So let me head over to him because I asked for a minute clip. He's given me a 2-minute clip breakdown. So I'll be a bit worried if Padonis is on Brisbane, but it's unlikely.
G'day guys, Padonis here. Hope you're all safe and well. Coming to you for round 26 for another live bet on what has been a stellar season so far, with another great winner with the Parramatta Eels saluting last week for us against the Roosters. Pretty much as sweat-free as you like. So let's go again with another underdog, and this one's going to be close to my heart. We're going to take the North Queensland Cowboys at plus 7.5. That's $1.83 on alt line on Sportsbet. I just think these two sides aren't as far away as what the market's indicating. I know Brisbane have looked at their dominant best over the last 2 weeks against inferior opponents in the Knights and the Dolphins, but I do think that the Cowboys are going to prove to be a much sterner test here and what is essentially their grand final game with a bye next week, nothing else to play for, no finals for them. They're going to give it all empty the tank in a big home spot to try and stop a rival from progressing higher up on the ladder. And I know Brisbane's named Adam Reynolds in the reserves, but I highly question whether he's going to play. I think he'll be ruled out and wrapped up for next week to get that game in before the finals. And Brisbane have looked fantastic without some of their key stars in Mem and Reynolds, but we've seen it time and time again. You can't sustain the same level. They're not the same side without those guys. So I think Ben Hunt and Billy Walters will have a bit of a down game. Walsh has been fantastic, but I think the Cowboys can contain him to a certain extent. But it's not really more of a play on fading Brisbane because they have plenty to play for, but it's more about a play on the Cows, thinking that they're going to turn up here and be desperate. They don't have to win the game. They can keep it close. I think 1-7 is a pretty generous margin for them. I had this line closer to 3.5. So if you like the Cows, jump on. Good luck. Gamble responsibly.
There you go. I've only got one best bet this week. It is the identical play to Padonis, found completely independently. And while I say identical, he found those odds on Sportsbet, and I found it on Ladbrokes and Neds, but same line, same price, same reasoning for the most part. And that increases my confidence because I've told you how successful we've been when my tips have aligned, I should say, with the sharpshooters. And Padonis, in his own right, in the tips he has given us this season, which is nearly every week, and we started in round 3, he has 16-5, which is better than 75%, right? So it's been absolutely unreal clip. Man's on fire. Last week is plus 10.5. You didn't need the 10 start. They won by 20. And even extra layer of confidence, and any bet can go down for sure. But Padonis, being a staunch Broncos fan, the fact that he's willing to fade his own team, you usually know that he's got a pretty clear reasons behind that. And then in addition, guys, another sharpshooter is firing at this game. So let's listen to Benny Williamson.
TryPod fam, as always, thanks to the boys for having me on. Absolute miracle try of the year with Dream Ball crossing at $3.10 last week. This week we're going to back it up with Jackson Purdue at $2.90 on Sportsbet and Ladbrokes. He's lightning quick, obviously. He's got an over 70% strike rate at left centre in 2025, 100% strike rate against the Broncos, which is negligible because it's only 1 from 1. But outside of the wingers, left centre is the highest scoring position against the Broncos. Stags can be a weapon in defence, but there's no competition when it comes to the pace. I reckon Jackson Purdue's going to light him up on the outside. $2.90, good enough for me. Let's go.
And that's Benny Williamson, who's also picking a Cowboy, so I'm happy with that. Now, Benny Howard is in the chat. Tell me, Benny, do you ever play on this game? Somebody said before that I'm against Benny taking the Cowboys in this one. And Benny's saying he'd be happy for Brisbane to win by 6. Has Benny Howard played an early line. Maybe I missed that one. If that's in the group, apologies. Maybe Benny can let us know. He did. I found it in the group. So Benny, when was this? A day ago, played the Brisbane -5.5. Look, if you can, and you just saw it on the weekend. You saw the Storm win by 6. I talk about this all the time, that if I think a game, or if I can get either side of the 6, it's such a common margin of victory that it can make an okay play a strong play. So Benny did tip it. And look, I give credit to Benny Howard, because if he's played a game at -5.5 and now it's 6.5 everywhere, that alone is a good play, and the market reflects that. I'm on the other side of it, hence why Benny would be happy to see Brisbane win by 6 or 7 is fine as well, because Benonis and I took that extra 7.2. So that explains. And if Benny wants to throw his reasoning why he went Brisbane in the comments, or else I can maybe read it quickly here as well. No, let us know in the comments, because I think he said I'll have more on this game later on. Oh, I might be able to read it out for you guys. I know it's not the best podcasting to do it live. No, never mind. We'll leave it. Oh, Benny, just out of interest, Benny had a bet on Bulldogs Panthers, but he was playing unders before he knew about the team list. So I was curious to see if Benny might have got a beautiful line on the Bulldogs. Okay, so that's a sharpshooter sort of seeing it differently to Panonis and I, but a little bit of wiggle room there because he's got the best of the market. That's everything to say on the Queensland derby. So let's move to Sunday. We've got 2 more games to cover. It's Sharks Knights next, and Cronulla is another big favourite in this weekend. 17.5-point favourites, the Sharks at Shark Park. I refuse to call it Shark Stadium. The top 4 is within reach for Cronulla as well. If Brisbane or New Zealand, if either of them lose, then Cronulla's really going to feel a great opportunity to get into the top 4. And if not, 5th or 6th is a pretty good consolation. But you've got to win the games that you've expected to win on paper. Cronulla's got to come in and take care of business here. And they are off a bye with ULA, and Kale Iro is back in the starting side as well. Nikora is still sidelined, and McInnes, of course, was lost in round 24. Newcastle have named the same side that threw in the towel, quite frankly, at home against Brisbane. So that included Gagai ended up shifting back to fullback, and the halves pairing, of course, was Arthur and Cogger. I can only look to Cronulla. Surprise, surprise. In this one, it's another team that's building towards finals intensity now. This potentially could be a banana peel style game where you don't take the Knights, or you may take your opponent a little lightly because you're expected to win. I guess, is there anyone in the comments who's going to play the plus 17.5 with Knights? I dare say if you shop around, you could even find 18.5. With a 3-try underdog, you want a team that's going to fight for 80. So I will repeat, just to caution you, they were tied at halftime in Canberra and lost the second half by 5 tries. They were flogged at home by 30 to Penrith. They were flogged at home by over 30 to Brisbane. And in between that, they were flogged away to the Cowboys. So are the Knights fighting for 80? Evidently in the last month, they have not. But do you get much value fading a team that has capitulated as much as Newcastle have? Probably not getting value going against them, but I want no part of the Novocastrians. So I do think the Sharks are pretty close to a lock. If I step back from this round, I've only got one best bet. But if you're building a multi, the Bulldogs are going to beat Penrith. I'll be shocked if they can't beat Penrith's New South Wales Cup, right? The Sharks are going to beat the Knights. And I know that's not saying much. They're both $10s, but you throw a couple of $10s, into your multi, and now you're magnifying it by 20, 25%, right? So I feel pretty confident to tell you that, which isn't saying a lot. But with a 3-try line, I guess I'm concerned that Cronulla could just have a cruise control victory here. Though admittedly, the Sharks are a type of side that if against a weakling opposition, they'll put you to the sword. So what it ultimately comes down to is, do you believe in the Knights' resilience? Because that's going to go a long way to determining who covers this line. I have no faith in that. I've left it alone. Let's move to the Winnie Clarkey Cup at Suncorp. The Dolphins are 5.5-point favourites. So it's Dolphins, Titans. And I think I said something along these lines earlier in the pod, but I was talking with some friends on Saturday night after the Dolphins had been dispatched by Manly, and I said, I'm dead. My hope is gone. But if the Eels beat the Roosters later tonight, I'll have life again. And then, to my absolute joy, they certainly did that and more with Parramatta. And now we're back, the Dolphins. And I believe we have a clear path to the finals, which means this game is so important, regardless of the Roosters' result. Even if the Roosters win, the Dolphins can still make the finals, but they have to beat the Titans. And if the Dolphins lose, and Storm are a favourite in Melbourne, then the Dolphins will actually control their own destiny to play finals. Now, Fini Furiaki and Fione are out, but Nikarima's back in the halves. Fuller starts at fullback, which is great for the attack, though the defense for the Finns has leaked 160 points in 3 weeks. I know it sounds like that can't be right, but they have given up 160 in 3 weeks. But what about this? Des sticks with the same 17 that literally caused him to malfunction in the press conference, if you caught that, where it just seemed like it was a record that just kept on repeating. Look, if there was going to be a change for the Titans, I think most Gold Coast fans would agree they'd like to have a look at Carter Gordon. He's had some injury setbacks that have delayed his ability to have any impact this season. You'd want to have a look at Carter Gordon, but I'll tell you what else is going to happen. Keanu Kinney has played off the bench for the last 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure the Titans have been down like 3 tries against New Zealand and down like 5 tries against Cronulla, if not more, before Kinney even got put on the game or put into the game. And what's he supposed to do? I guarantee you this week they'll shift Kinney to fullback. He'll get the start and he'll probably tear up. I said to Tristan weeks ago, you're going to win one more game this year, and it's going to be you're going to beat the Dolphins. It's going to get you out of the wooden spoon spot, and then you'll lose to the Tigers in round 27, and you'll get the spoon. And beating the Dolphins will cost us top 8. And it's all playing out that way, right? So the Titans, this team that just shoots himself in the foot time and time again, since that shock win against New Zealand, I'm fully prepared for Roosters lose Friday night. I get my hopes sky high. We're going to play finals. We've just got to beat the Titans, and we control everything in round 27. And then we're going to slip up the Dolphins to the 17th place Gold Coast. Like, I can see that happening. There is an advantage in the middle with Mo, RCG, and Tino. There's a clear size advantage for sure. Look, and the Titans do have something to play for because assuming Newcastle loses to Cronulla, the Titans can actually get off the bottom of the ladder with a win on Sunday. So why are the Finns favourite? Well, they are still like clearly the better team, and they do have some dynamic weapons in attack. And I would like to think that if the Dolphins can improve the intensity in defence, and if you can amp things up without the ball, then there should be too much class on display for the Finns, and they should win a must-win match. But I'm far from certain. So therefore, possession's going to be 9/10 of the law in this one, because whoever has the ball is going to be scoring, and I don't see a great deal of toughness on either side. So maybe overs, you suggest? Well, the total is 54.5, which is the highest total of the season. That's an over under 9.5 tries. So maybe it still hits, given the sort of the averages that these teams give up. But that's why I couldn't play overs either, because that's a high total decline. And it is a highly important game for the Dolphins, and I'd like to think that they actually could clamp down on the Titans, because if you can't keep the Titans, sort of under 20 points, then what's the point of turning up to the finals? Because anyone, you play is going to be a fair bit of a bigger threat, and they're going to, stamp your one-way ticket straight out of there pretty quickly. So I'd like to think that with a bit of importance in this game, that it could be played with a bit more desperation, and maybe there's not going to be 10 tries in this one, but neither of these teams have showed me toughness to think otherwise. So I do think it's going to come down to maximizing, sort of making hay when you have possession, and any resilience is going to go a long way towards winning this one. And I think Dolphins favored by just under a converted try is fair, because I am absolutely on upset alert. I mean, of anyone you can play in the comp, I'd probably like to play Newcastle this week if I could choose anyone, or Penrith's B team wouldn't be too bad either. But you can't ask for much more than being at home to the last place team, while the Roosters have got to go down to Melbourne. So, as a Finns fan, I'm hoping that we can take advantage of that and catch up to the Roosters this weekend. And again, I almost feel like the need to apologise when I only come up with one best bet. But you know what? That's the beauty of having the sharpshooters as well, that you've got 3 extra players to consider. And you've heard the way I've seen these games, and you know that when I do give you a best bet, it's because I've got that level of confidence that I don't fabricate. It really is genuine, and it averages out to nearly every second game. But some weeks you're going to have more plays than others. So let me know what you think of my one play. Let me know about any other good ones you think I might have missed, or just carry on the conversation. Have a great week. Enjoy your footy this weekend, and I'll see you next Tuesday. Lego.